I woke up to roughly 10,000 emails this morning bringing news from the UK. In the United Kingdom, the House of Lords has called for an immediate classification of loot boxes as gambling. This is because loot boxes are, of course, gambling, something I've been saying for years. And so, the House of Lords wants loot boxes regulated like gambling because it's gambling, because gambling mechanics are gambling, and that's what gambling is. Last year, the House of Commons, that's the lower house of the British Parliament, published a damning report on the game industry and the way it uses loot boxes to make money specifically from kids. In that report, which we talked about in September 2019, loot boxes were described as gambling because it's impossible to describe a loot box as anything other than gambling because it's gambling. And now the upper house has followed suit, saying that loot boxes, which are gambling by the way, are gambling. Word comes from this BBC News article that, like I said, was sent to me about 10,000 times. Let's have a look at it. The House of Lords Gambling Committee says video game loot boxes should be regulated under gambling laws. The Lords say they should be classified as games of chance, which would bring them under the Gambling Act of 2005. If a product looks like gambling and feels like gambling, it should be regulated as gambling. I imagine that's what any report from the House of Lords sounds like. I mean, the name Lords in the title. They're all gonna be posh. I can't remember anything about British politics. The government must act immediately to bring loot boxes within the remit of gambling legislation and regulation. Lord Grey, chairman of the committee, told BBC Breakfast, yum yum yum, that lots of other countries have already started to regulate loot boxes because they can see the dangers, which is teaching kids to gamble. He said the Gambling Act was way behind what was actually happening in the market, but he added that the overwhelming majority of the report's recommendations could be enacted today as they don't require legislation. Which makes sense. I mean, loot boxes are nothing but fucking gambling, and there's already legislation for gambling. It's just got to apply to the gambling in games. Now, these reports from the UK Gambling Commissions focus on children predominantly because of course they do. Whether it's the House of Commons or the House of Lords or other parliamentary bodies around the world, doing it for the good of the kids is the way that things get done half the time. Of course, in my coverage of loot boxes, I've looked at even wider issues with the entire concept, including problem gambling, exploitation of addiction, and other vulnerable members of the audience, and that does include children. If for nothing other than the fact, I mean, I don't really like kids, but if for nothing other than the fact that if you rate a game as suitable for children, it should not have mechanics which are legislated as unsuitable for children already. It's just that fucking simple, folks. It's what I've said time and time again. If you want gambling mechanics in your game, go for it. Fill your fucking boots. But gambling should be treated as gambling. Culturally, ethically, legally. Because that's what it fucking is. It's actually what some of these reports have said, often seeming to quote me verbatim. And I'm not suggesting any of them have been watching my work, but people who do watch my work were among those who wrote into these committees that were looking into this stuff to provide them with their own perspective and information and concerns. So one way or another, the ideas we talk about on this channel filtered into those reports, and I may be biased, but I think that's a good thing. The Lords report is wide-ranging, covering the entire gambling industry, but focuses in part on new forms of gambling and those targeted towards children. There is academic research which proves that there is a connection, though not necessarily a causal link, between loot box spending and problem gambling, it says. One expert, Dr. David Zendel, explained to the committee that either loot box spending causes problem gambling due to their similarity, or that people who have gambling problems spend heavily on loot boxes. But he warned that either way the connection was extraordinarily robust. Now, last year we published, still my favourite Jimquisition, The Addictive Cost of Predatory Video Game Monetization. I'm still very proud of it. I recommend you check it out. It's not exactly a fun, funny watch. It's one of my more serious, darker episodes, but it is also probably the most important one I've ever done. I 100% believe that loot boxes make things worse for those with pre-existing gambling issues, because I've spoken to those people. People who have overspent in video games because they were in a dark period of their lives and video games preyed upon it. People who have run from video game to video game chased by microtransactions and loot boxes. Because they know they have issues, they're trying to use video games as an escape from those issues, and the video games themselves take those issues and monetize them and drop them back in the player's fucking lap. The game industry goes out of its way to abuse everyone, both within and without game development. Staff members within companies, journalists covering these companies, people buying the games from these companies. In some way, shape or form, the industry has a multitude of ways to abuse these people. Up to and including assault in some cases, exploitation in many cases, coercion, implied threats, the systemic covering up of said abuses, and of course all manner of pressure and psychological abuse inflicted upon people who play games to try and swindle money out of them. I hesitate to say the game industry is evil, but it is full of evil. And while I like to think that if you were to cut all that away, there's something salvageable underneath, I just don't know anymore. But in any case, I'm fine with this. Regulate loot boxes, they're gambling. We already regulate gambling, so we should regulate loot boxes because the loot boxes are gambling. No one's saying video games can't have them, it's just that video games would have to be accountable in the same way other industries are accountable, which I know for video game publishers is one of the most horrifyingly unreasonable asks in the world. To have a little bit of fucking responsibility. To have to answer to someone else for their own fucking shit. But they can't say they weren't warned. Because for years, and I know I keep bringing this up, but it's so right. For years I told you, I told them. This is where it was all leading. And every time a story like this comes out, I become just that little bit more correct. The industry was warned, the industry didn't fucking care. So if this leads to FIFA Ultimate Team packs getting regulated, as the Lords are interested in doing, then I say good. Fuck FIFA. Fuck Electronic Arts. Fuck the game industry. I'm done being diplomatic about it, or as diplomatic as I get. So-called AAA game companies are dens of roaches that need flushing out. Screw them.